Jason, imagine a dream job where you had to travel all across America during the COVID-19 chaos.
Yeah.
And you had to work a ton of hours, and you made no additional pay.
Yeah.
And then every time you posted something on social media, it upset half the population. Imagine that kind of a job, baby.
Oh, keep talking to me.
Well, on today's show, Pastor Brian, the co-founder of peaceablygather.com, he's a megachurch pastor. He joins us to share why it's time to open America's churches and why he's decided to put his entire life on hold to share the truth. Jason, are you excited?
Oh, I'm super excited.
Jason, how excited are you?
I'm so excited. In fact, I'd like to walk over there and show you exactly how excited I am.
Okay, let's do it. James, how far away from the microphone is Jason now located, do you think, if you had to estimate?
12 feet.
Okay, Jason, do you want to demonstrate how excited you are now?
I'm so excited! Get ready to enter the Thrive Time Show.
We started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. We started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, now we here.
We started from the bottom, now we're on the top, teaching you the systems to get what we got. Colton Dixon's on the hooks, I break down the books. Z's bringing some wisdom and the good looks. As the father of five, that's why I'm alive. So if you see my wife and kids, please tell them hi. It's C&Z up on your radio, and now 3, 2, 1, here we go.
We started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, and we'll show you.
Yes, 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 and yes. Thrive Nation, on today's show, we have an incredible man who happens to be a good friend of mine and the pastor of the mega church called His Church. That's hischurch.com. Pastor Brian Gibson, welcome on to the Thrive Time Show. How are you, sir?
Well, hey, I'm doing great today, Clay, and it's always an honor to be on the Thrive Time and to be in the presence of Clay Clark. So thank you so much for having me today, my brother.
Now, this past year, you have been traveling around America to awaken the church and to share the truth about the religious persecution that is going on in these great United States. And I think a lot of people, I'm going to choose to believe that a lot of people probably aren't aware of the religious persecution that's going on to the level that you are. I mean, you've become sort of a national expert. You've been on Huckabee, you've been on Fox and Friends, you've been on One American News, Newsmax, all over the media sharing the truth. Share with us about the religious persecution that's going on in our country, and maybe give us some specific examples of it that you've seen as you've traveled around the country.
Wow, what's happened in America this year has been unprecedented and unparalleled in American history as far as religious persecution goes. I'm one of the only guys I know that hit executive platinum on American during COVID. I ran into another traveling speaker in the airport the other day, and he told me it was his first trip out since COVID. And I said, man, I just hit American executive platinum. So I've been around the country. I've been with faith leaders. I've been in states where they've done the most unconstitutional, un-American, and unacceptable things to people of faith, especially Christians across this nation. And the examples range from New York, where they persecuted Orthodox Jews for celebrating some of their most holy days. Governor Cuomo sending out cops to shut them down while he allowed rioters in the streets and people protesting in the streets. But the Orthodox Jewish community couldn't celebrate one of their highest holy holidays, all the way to the other side of the nation in California, where currently my friend Che Ahn is looking at 1 year of incarceration for having his church open. If you show up to Che Ahn's church, you're looking at a potential $1,000 fine. And that's just one story in California, Clay. They go on and on and on. We got John MacArthur right now looking at serious legal troubles. As a matter of fact, L.A., who'd had a decades-long, 3 or 4 decades-long lease with him for parking, pulled the lease to his parking because they didn't like the fact that he was having church according to the First Amendment, and Governor Nero Newsom came against MacArthur. I have another friend in Thousand Oaks, California, Pastor McCoy. I was at his place because they were saying they were going to arrest Christians for attending his church there in Ventura, California. I went out that weekend because I want a chance to be arrested for the gospel. I got arrested in the 90s for drinking and disorderly conduct and all sorts of bad things. I want to be arrested for something good, for standing for the cause of Christ. So you won't see a lot of this in the mainstream media. You won't hear a lot about this in the news. But I'm telling you, your First Amendment rights are up in the air in America right now. And even non-religious people, Clay, have been saying this to us, that have come from countries that were taken over by totalitarian governments, Marxist governments.
Yep.
Even non-religious people say, we recognize that they always go after the church first. They'll say, I'm not a religious person, but in our country, the first move they made was against the church. And then the next thing, they came after all of our freedoms. See, the church and the voice of the church and the life of the church and the freedom that comes from the church to a nation, it is of preeminence and it's of the first place. And if it falls, everything else falls like a domino.
Now, Pastor Brian, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cue up the audio. Pastor John MacArthur, who you mentioned, he produced a video that is now going viral all across the nation explaining really what you've been talking about for the past 5 months. I mean, you're one of the first pastors. Actually, you were the first pastor in the nation that was on national mainstream media talking about religious persecution. So I'm going to play the audio for you there, Brian. It's about 3 minutes long, and I'd like for you to be able to listen to it and then to be able to provide your feedback on what you're hearing here. Okay, so I'll kind of let you gather your thoughts as I play this audio for many people who have yet to hear it. And the video is called Church is Essential. This is by Pastor John MacArthur, based out there in California. So here we go.
The church is essential. Hi, I'm John MacArthur, and I am pastor of Grace Community Church right here in Los Angeles, and I have been for over half a century. This is a church committed to the bedrock conviction that the Bible is the Word of God, and we, in obedience to that Word, have met together every Sunday for all these years. We've been protected by our government. We've been given freedom to do that. Today's current crop of politicians are trampling on the Constitution and on the resolve of citizens to demand their rights under the pressure of a manufactured fear. The reality is that the COVID data just doesn't match the government's COVID narrative. Here in the state of California, we have 40 million people. The people that have COVID now are 1/100th of 1%, 0.001. You have a 99.999 chance to survive COVID.
Pause right there. Pastor Brian, you're a pastor. You now know that the survival rate from COVID-19 is 99.99%. James, you're an attorney. You are not a pastor. You also know that the data shows that there's a 99.99% survival rate. James, I want to get your take first, and then Brian second. You live in Manhattan, bro, where the lockdowns have been massively intense. You moved to Oklahoma to help us fight some of these mandates. You came out pretty early, James, recognizing that the data just simply didn't support lockdowns. Are your friends and family aware that the data does simply not support or justify locking down America? Or did your friends get it, James?
You know, at first they didn't, and then they started to, and now more are getting it. Like, I had a friend of mine that I saw over the weekend, and he said that he's done with the masks himself. And hi, Brian. How are you?
Hey, it's good to hear you, James.
All right. Thanks.
So James, we have your take. Pastor Brian, obviously you care about your church and you care about your people and keeping them safe. But now that you know that the survival rate is 99.99%, do most pastors know this? Do you think? Well, what's your take as you're running around the country sharing the truth and trying to encourage America's churches to open? What kind of feedback are you getting?
Well, unfortunately, Clay, most pastors don't know this, or they would have opened up their churches, right? I think the stats still show that about 37% of the churches in America are open, and of that 37% of churches that are open, their pre-COVID attendance, they're running about 30%. So there's a problem in the messaging of what comes out of the mainstream media and what the truth is about COVID, and particularly COVID deaths. Most of us have seen the language change from deaths to cases, right? And then if you follow that out with the cases, many of these cases are asymptomatic. They don't have problems. They don't lead to death. So the narrative had to change to keep the fear factor rolling in America. So most of these pastors, we came out of the gate screaming, open up your church, come on, do it safely and sanely, before we had all this data. But we knew that if we didn't take a stand now, and this is way back in early May, if we didn't take a stand now, that we were going to lose our First Amendment rights. Now we fast forward all the way to October, And still there are so many people that haven't got a hold of this messaging that COVID is not a death sentence. We have multiple treatments now that are effective in fighting COVID. We know that it's 99.999, survival rate. I'll take those odds any day of the week. And so what happened to so many Americans and their churches is they became ruled by fear instead of ruled by facts. Whenever we're ruled by fear instead of ruled by facts, we make illogical, fear-based decisions. And it's time for a fear-filled world to see a faith-filled church. I pray that more of my brothers and sisters that are in the leadership of the body of Christ get a hold of this, and that's the bell we're ringing at peaceablygather.com. And we'll be ringing it tonight at a special event we have going called churchprepared.com. Churchprepared.com. It's for pastors. It's for church leaders. It's also for anybody that cares about their church. And we have 9 different experts talking about their area of expertise, whether it be free legal advice, whether it be your constitutional rights, whether it be potential cures for COVID, all the way down to how to deal with your children in the midst of a shutdown and their educational choices. Talking about, we want to get the message out that COVID should not have our world locked down, nor should it have the doors of our churches closed.
Quick recap for anybody out there that does not know this. We'll go 90 miles an hour, but I want to make sure I go slow enough so we can all get it. 1, the models that were originally used to predict that 2.2 million people might die from COVID-19, those models, Andrew, were made by who? Who made the models that said that said 2.2 million Americans might die from the coronavirus?
Mr. Neil Ferguson.
Oh, you win a mega point. And what is the name of the organization that Neil Ferguson was the director of at that time?
The Abdul Latif Jameel Institute.
And who funded that organization?
The good old folks at Amazon.com.
Brian, it turns out the models were wrong. The models that were used to justify the lockdown in the name of not overwhelming America's hospitals. Now we're doing these PCR tests that are shown to be wrong all the time. And now this is interesting, Brian. If we were going to go to California, did you know that you and I could go to the liquor store? You could go to the liquor store to witness to the lost. You could go to the dispensaries to witness to the lost as a pastor, and you could go to the abortion clinics, Brian, because those are all still open, but yet churches are not allowed to be open in name of protecting America from a virus that has a 99.99% survival rate. If the churches don't speak out, how does this end?
Well, what it ends with, Clay, if the churches don't get loud and they don't start to exercise their rights, and we don't start to move in the area of civil disobedience, we're going to lose our right to the freedom of worship in America. Now, listen, I've preached the gospel around the world. I've preached it in communist countries. I've preached it in Muslim countries where they'll kill you for the preaching of the gospel. And the one thing that separates us from them is the First Amendment. The government can't form a state religion, and it can't hinder any form of worship. That's one of our foundational bedrock rights that makes us America. If we don't stand up and do something now, and I'm not talking about tomorrow, I'm not talking about next month, I'm talking about today. If we don't do something now, those rights will be lost for our children, our grandchildren, and for the rest of our lives. And I'll tell you, every day the doors of a church are closed, a little bit of liberty dies. Lady Liberty is having a long death by 1,000 cuts right now in America.
True.
And Americans need to stand up against this.
I'm going to play the remainder of the audio here. Again, this is Pastor John MacArthur sharing why he believes church is essential. Here we go.
It's just not what they're saying it is. That absolutely does not warrant shutting down anything, but especially absurdly and arbitrarily churches that have a special protection from the Constitution. Oh, and at the same time, leaving open abortion clinics, strip clubs, and marijuana dispensaries. And by the way, the health department is on record as saying they are going to allow riots and protests without regard for the mandated health and safety ordinances. This is obviously targeted discrimination. Leftists.
Okay, think about this, okay? So we're talking about these certain protections, Brian, are in the Constitution. The First Amendment, James, you're an attorney. The First Amendment gives Americans the right to peaceably assemble, the right to peaceably gather, the right. Brian, it seems like the Constitution is being run over roughshod right now. James, I want to get your take on this first. You're an attorney. As you see it, is it unconstitutional to keep people from attending church?
Oh, it has to be, yeah. I mean, the Constitution came from the Bible, right? Came from God.
Okay, so think about this. Okay, this is the First Amendment, Brian. I'm going to read this to you. It reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble. Brian, it would seem like as though there can't be a law made to keep people from being able to gather. What kind of justifications are being used by the governor of Kentucky? Because you have locations of his church campuses located in both Texas and Kentucky. What kind of justifications are you hearing from your tyrannical governor out there in Kentucky?
Well, the tyrannical governor in Kentucky, Governor Beshear, he started out every night with a fireside chat that should have been entitled "The Church is a super spreader rat that is killing America." Every night he would find another example that he'd blown out of proportion. Come to find out, when they were fact checked, some of them weren't even true or right. And that he would say that almost every case was coming out of some sort of religious assembly or some sort of church assembly. He painted coronavirus as a very good Christian that always attended church, right? But I never heard him one time say that there was a transmission in a Walmart, which was open, transition in a Target, which was open, a transition in a liquor store, which was open. As a matter of fact, the BLM riots that showed up in Louisville, Kentucky, we have the Kentucky Derby, which is something near and dear to every person from the Commonwealth of Kentucky's heart. He was going to allow 23,000 people, all right, 23,000 people in the Churchill Downs to witness a horse race. But he would not allow the people of First Baptist, of the Methodist Church, Episcopalian Church, you name it, Catholic, Charismatic. None of us could do services together. That was terrible. And he said, you can't do it. You shouldn't do it. It's irresponsible. His main excuse was you were irresponsible and you were becoming a massive health threat. He's still playing the same fiddle, but the stats don't add up. Now, I believe we have the Constitution. One of the framers of the Constitution, one of the founders, said the Constitution protects us from our own best interest in protecting ourselves. See, most of the time, whenever liberty is taken from a person by a nation or by an overreaching government, it's sold by the fact that we are going to protect you, we are going to provide for you, we are going to take care of you. We know better than you. And you can buy into that until you meet a few politicians. And then you find out that politicians are people just like you. They have biases. They have preconceived ideas. They have lobbyists that they have to play ball with in order to get the money. It's as wicked, and I'm not saying every politician, but it's as dirty of a business that exists out there. And thinking that a politician or a governor has the best interest of people more than the pastor of a local church is ludicrous. And really, I believe it's a message sent straight from the pit of hell.
I don't think people know this, but in communist China, China has actually ordered Christians to take down crosses, images of Jesus, and to worship communist leaders, not God. This was reported. This is mainstream media now. Fox News reported, and again, Josh Hawley has come out strong about this. But you guys are actually being censored online right now, Pastor Brian. I don't think people recognize this. They want you to not meet in person, but then they also are censoring you online. And this is pretty crazy. I don't think a lot of people recognize this, but we're talking about Josh Hawley is introducing legislation right now. He's a senator from Missouri, because they're finding out that tech companies are now censoring you online. Have you personally encountered big tech companies censoring your services or things you're saying online through social media?
Absolutely. I've been censored online more times than I can count now, Clay. As a matter of fact, I had my Facebook page, my personal Facebook page, taken away, and there was no way of getting it back. I got some blanket statement from that platform, and it was gone. And it was gone for more than a year. Still never returned to me. I had to start over from scratch. So that happened to me. And to be honest, during that time they took it from me, I wasn't even that politically active. It was pre-COVID. Now, I always say what I think, so I have strong biblical preaching, but it wasn't like the time we're living in now. Since then, and whenever we started peaceablygather.com, calling pastors to open up churches across America, the censorship hit another level. My posts would go up. Let's say if I was interviewed by Fox or interviewed by Huckabee, you would share something, it would be gone. You would put it up. My friends would say, hey, we tried to share it. It won't let us share it. And now it's disappeared. And so we have those things we're dealing with. And then we live broadcast our services, like you say. They're telling people not to meet together, but to broadcast your services and let people come to church at home. And now we do that. I'm not against that, but I believe it's a supplement and it's not the main course. Christians have to meet together. It's a part of our theology.
Yep.
It's the sacred assembly. And so underwear church is what I've called it in America. A lot of Americans prefer just to roll out in their underwear on Sunday morning, not have to make the effort to become a worshiper, no sacrifice, to get up and get ready and to come to the house of God. Underwear church is rising in popularity. But what people don't know who only attend underwear church is that the censorship on many of these platforms, one in particular, if I get up, we found it, I broadcast from one location to 3 other locations. I also broadcast to multiple platforms. Whenever I say certain buzzwords, or I may hit something that people think is political, I call it prophetic, because if the Bible talks about it, it's prophetic, right? It may strike a political nerve, but it's my job. As a matter of fact, if you read the prophets and you read through Isaiah, there will be one prophecy against a kingdom after another. It would read highly political. John the Baptist lost his head for prophesying against King Herod. He was highly political. Jesus spoke out against 4 different political groups, the Pharisees, Sadducees, the Essenes, and the Zealots. It was highly political. And if you've got a pastor that hasn't said enough to get censored by these platforms, you don't have a man of God in your pulpit. I'll say you have someone who is a pollster, someone who leads by polls in the pulpit. But what's amazing, Clay, is that our live stream will run perfect to all of our other campuses and to certain platforms, but this one platform, it will start squeezing it, and it'll slow it down, and it'll make it where the viewer can't even stand to watch.
It's unwatchable. It'll cut you out. It'll mute you. It kind of starts and stops. It stutters. It's like a strobing effect. The audio goes in and out. I've tried watching it. It's really unbearable and intentional anytime you start talking about current, relevant scripture that relates to what's going on right now. It's truly disturbing. Now, Brian, I had 2 final questions for you here. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25 reads, "Not forsaking the assembly of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as ye see the day approaching." A lot of pastors, I don't know if they're unaware of that scripture, the idea that we shouldn't stop meeting together even as we get closer to the end times. What sort of justification are you hearing from pastors that don't want to speak out about this, that don't want to be open right now? What are you hearing?
Well, there is no justification for this, Clay, but I'll tell you why they do it. The reason they do it, number one, is they're full of fear. Number 2, they're pleasers of men instead of pleasers of God. And number 3, it is more profitable for the church to be an online church than it is to be open in person. Now, I've been hesitant to talk about this because I don't like throwing my fellow clergymen under the bus. But here's what we found in church finances during COVID. I want to be very clear, and I want to let the world know what's really happened here. And if you're in one of these churches, why you should leave it today and go to a church that's meeting in person. When COVID first hit, for the first 2 weeks, church giving, which church has to operate just like anywhere else has to operate. We have mortgages, we have light bills, we have employee payments for salaries.
Yeah.
It's just like it's got a business side. It's a spiritual entity, and we take care of people, but there is a business side. So immediately the first 2 weeks, Clay, COVID hit, our giving went to 60% of normal giving. And we had to come together and make a decision as a board on what we would do.
Yep.
And so we made appropriate cuts to match that. Then we watched as we closed down almost all of our expenses, where you don't have to run your buildings, and you take church straight online. Do you know what happened to the giving when it went straight online?
What?
It went back to 100%, and then it went to 150% of normal giving. When you're doing online church, we brought in another 50% of our normal income.
Wow.
Right? There were less expenses and more money than we've ever had before as a church coming into the house of God.
You hate when money.
And so then,
you hate that. You hate to hear that money is impacting the decisions. But I appreciate you sharing this because I've heard this from multiple pastors, and somebody has to say it.
no, it's time for somebody to say it. And it's time for somebody to say it. So there are guys out there that are pushing with large platforms that are pushing large numbers of pastors to go online and maybe stay online for another year or two.
Get out of here.
Because it's working for them financially. And that kind of thought is creeping through the body of Christ. So when I started calling churches to go back to church, man, people started sending me threats. You're just in it because the money's down. You're just money hungry. No, when we went back to church, there was less money than there was when we had church online. I could go straight church online, and the money would flow and roll, and there would be no expenses. And that's what I believe is motivating a lot of these guys.
Yeah.
It's the love of money.
Now, Pastor Brian, if we go to churchprepared.com, who is speaking at your event? I know you're going to archive it, so if people hear this show after it already happened, who is speaking at your event? That's my final question for you here. Who is speaking at this Church Prepared event you're hosting?
Listen, this event's going to be incredible. We've got one of the greatest lineups, I believe, in the nation for an event like this. We have Kelly Shackelford for First Liberty.
Oh, wow.
He has the largest religious freedom
he's on Fox
in America.
He's on Fox all the time. I
Say
mean, this
that-
guy, he's on Fox
Oh,
News all the time, and he's always fighting for church rights. He's huge.
No, he's been on Fox. He's been on Hannity. You name it, he's been on there. And he's won 10 massive cases for liberty during the COVID shutdown. Incredible man. We have the constitutional coach will be on there, Rick Green, that'll talk to you about your constitutional rights. Incredible. We have Sheriff Mack, who talks about the constitutional sheriff. He'll be on there tonight. A lot of people don't know that the sheriff is the most powerful man in the land within his jurisdiction. And even if someone were to want to violate your First Amendment rights, and it even went through the courts, the sheriff has the power to shut that down and not allow you to be arrested that day. We have Sam Sorbo, her and her husband, produced the movie God's Not Dead in many Christian films.
Yeah.
She's had a massive talk show. She's talking about educational options for your children. I have Pastor LaShawn Lambert, who is talking about righteousness in race relationship, which is incredible. He's a friend of mine, African-American preacher who ministered in a multicultural church for 15, 16 years. Now is an African-American preacher that's reaching out to Native Americans and First Nation people in the state of Washington. If anybody can talk about ministering to all races, it's Pastor LaShawn. They're going to want to hear that. We have Ryan Dobson talking about taking care of your family. That's the son of the James Dobson.
Oh, wow.
Dr. James Dobson will be
Hey, by the
on
way,
there.
when you said the Sorbos, he played Mr. Sorbo. He played Hercules, right?
Oh yeah, he was Hercules for many years.
The TV show.
And
yeah.
then Sam also had a big career as a model in Hollywood, and then I think she was on the show Hercules as well.
Kevin Sorbo is a beautiful man. I might watch just to see Kevin Sorbo. Hercules.
I wonder if he has the same haircut he had during Hercules. Is what I want to know. Because,
unbelievable.
The
Okay.
locks were flowing back in the day. So I'm telling you, myself and my wife Jessie will also be talking to the pastors on there about how to deal with crisis. See, a lot of pastors, they're not dealing with the constitutional crisis.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not affected financially, but their crisis is within their congregation.
Right.
They have a split congregation, and there are people that don't want to open, people that do want to open. There are people that want to wear masks, people that don't want to wear masks.
Well, quick.
And so we're talking to them about leading.
Quick update here, folks. I just want to make sure we all know this as we wrap up today's show. Dr. Richard Bartlett. Jason, you've met Dr. Richard Bartlett, right?
I have.
He's a former top medical advisor for Governor Perry of Texas for 7 consecutive years. James, have you met Dr. Bartlett?
Yes, sir, I have.
Andrew, have you met Dr. Bartlett?
I have.
Pastor Brian, have you met Dr. Bartlett?
Many times.
Okay, this guy, he's in Texas, former top advisor for the governor of Texas for 7 consecutive years. He's treated over 1,000 COVID-19 patients with no deaths. Okay? So that's pretty good. 1,000 wins, no losses. And that is, we're not even factoring in the fact that the virus isn't deadly for 99.99% of the population before the treatment. So this idea that anybody could be debating whether they should wear a mask or go to church or not, folks, we just got to get back to church. Come on now. Come on. Quit calling in sick. Quit avoiding church. Some of you don't attend church when it rains or when it snows. We got to get serious. We got to get back in church. Brian, in that event, one more time, where can we find out more about that event if we want to watch it, or maybe we missed it but we want to go back and see it? What's the website? One more time.
Hey, they should go to churchprepared.com, get signed up, save yourself a seat for tonight, churchprepared.com. It's going to be great for pastors, church leaders, and people that just care about the body of Christ. Come on and get the information.
I've got a sound clip. I believe this is the right sound clip, Andrew, that I think that Pastor Brian's going to be using tonight to introduce Kevin Sorbo onto the event. Let me hit play here. Brian, you can tell us if this is, in fact, the right audio clip. It could be the wrong clip. We never know. Let me see here.
I will.
Come on, muscle. Oh, you fat. I'm muscle. Oh, look at my little bit. Oh, he's a little Hercules. Show me muscle again. Oh, Hercules. Show me muscle again.
Are you going to be doing a lot of muscle comparisons there on this event, or is that the wrong clip there, Brian? I think
no, that's the one. That's the one, and there will be comparisons.
Wow, Pastor Brian, thank you so much for being on today's show. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we're going to air your interview on Mike Huckabee at the tail end of this show so people can hear more about what you have to say there. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thank you so much, Clay. It was an honor.
Take care. Bye.
My next guest is a pastor, and he says that every day that the pandemic shutdown orders continue and churches remain closed, a bit of liberty dies. He's launched a movement. It's called Peaceably Gather, so that people can safely reopen churches and restore constitutional rights to practice faith. Please welcome Pastor Brian Gibson. Pastor, great to have you here.
Well, Governor, it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having us. It really is special to be with you today.
I think every church in America, I know mine, like other churches, did online services, for several weeks. That's all they had. But there comes a point at which, the Bible tells us to not forsake the assembling of ourselves together. And I think some pastors are saying, we can't do this forever. It's not about the church building and the meeting. It's about the encouragement that we get. What was the last straw for you that said, we need to practice our faith again?
Our church put together a drive-through Easter egg handout for kids, workers less than 10 wearing masks and gloves. We advertise it heavily. Nobody's getting out of cars. It's a drive-through. On the day we were going to do that drive-through, we get a call from the Green River Health Department, which was an extension of Governor Beshear, telling us, you can't do that. You can't pass out these eggs. I complied that day. I wish I wouldn't have, Governor, because my people are sitting at our church house.
Yeah.
They're looking across the road at the fast food places with a teenage kid putting French fries in cardboard boxes. The liquor stores are serving their patrons. The coffee shops are pushing lattes and brevets. And the message became loud and clear, and it affected me.
You've got campuses in several locations. You started the movement called Peaceably Gather.
Yes, sir.
Now, it's gathering steam is what it's gathering, because there are a lot of pastors like you. Look, I know the critics. They're going to say, you don't care about people getting infected. You're putting people's lives at risk. What do you say to those folks when they tell you that?
Well, the movement is peaceablygather.com, and it comes from the First Amendment, where we have a right to peaceably assemble. Also, we have a right to freedom of religion. Right? Government won't have a state religion, and it can't hinder religion.
Yeah.
And we're saying we want to be safe, we want to be sane, right? We're not crazy, but we are constitutional. And I promise you, my critics, you are more safe in my church services than you are in a Walmart with 1,000 people.
And you don't know who those folks are.
Yeah, I don't know who they are, but think about people walking through a grocery store, handling produce, setting it back down.
Yeah.
I drove by Home Depot. I think they were having a rave in there or something because the parking lots are full.
It's the only place people could go.
Yeah, it's where they're going.
So let's talk about some of the things you are doing, Pastor Gibson, that make people safe and really kind of defy this notion that you're reckless when you have church.
Yes, sir. People are being ushered in. We have our seating set up. I know at one of the campuses, it's setting in seats of 6 and then seats of 3. By the way, Governor Abbott, it's been incredible in Texas, called us essential. I want to thank President Trump for saying church is essential. Governor Beshear has said we are not essential. And come this next election cycle, I believe he's going to become non-essential for the state of Kentucky. And that's what I'm going to see to it, that he becomes non-essential.
You are on your way to Chicago to gather with a group of people in the Romanian church.
Yes, sir.
I may have to bail you out, friend, because they're not real happy up there. The mayor and the governor of Illinois, mayor of Chicago, governor of Illinois, not exactly the friendliest people toward church.
Well, you ought to come with me because I understand you're one of the finest preachers in the world, and I'll watch you preach up there. We can go to jail together. Maybe we'll get the same cell. You know, I made a pledge, and I was on Fox News, interviewed by Harris Faulkner, and I really feel like if I'm asking pastors, and I'm asking pastors, religious leaders, priests, rabbis, it's not just a Christian issue; it's a constitutional issue. Open up your houses of worship. Do it safe. Do it sane. And I said, listen, if you're afraid to go to jail, I'll come and go to jail with you.
Yeah.
I think the sentiment in America is we are America. It's in our DNA. We have religious freedom. And so thousands of more churches are coming on with us. We've linked arms with networks in Chicago, got networks from Pennsylvania calling. I got friends from Hawaii calling, friends from Alaska. I believe by Pentecost Sunday, there's not just going to be thousands, there's going to be tens of thousands of churches. They go back into the house of worship safely and sanely. And we're saying this isn't Vietnam. This is America.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing. I think America does. And I want to tell you, if I'm unable to go this weekend, but I'm going to send Trey Corley up there with you because he's never been in jail, and it's time he experiences it.
Well, let's break him in, God.
All right,
we'll do it right.
God bless you. And I want to remind everybody, look, Brian is not sending people in to hug and you know, swap bodily fluids by mouth kissing or anything like that. It's a safe environment that he's promoting, and we're grateful for what he's doing. Keith, would you tell everybody how they can get involved in this important movement led by Pastor Gibson?
Well, if you're a pastor, rabbi, priest, or worshiper, I encourage you to visit peaceablygather.com to learn your First Amendment rights and to sign the petition supporting restoration of religious freedom. That's peaceablygather.com. You can also learn more about Pastor Brian Gibson at hischurch.cc.
And now, without any further ado, 3, 2, 1, boom!